Hey, Ditch Fishers. Welcome to the very first Ditch Fisher podcast. Today's episode is titled, Are You a Ditch Fisher? So, what the heck is a ditch fisher? Well, more on that in a minute, but since this is the first ever episode, let me give you a little background about who I am and where I'm coming from with the Ditch Fisher Project. So, just to introduce myself, my name is Quinn, and I'm just a guy who likes to be outside. You're not going to really hear me talk too much about myself or my personal life because the Ditch Fisher Project isn't about me, really. It's more about the places I explore and my stories. And it's about you and your stories. But just to get started, let me give you some background about where I'm coming from. My hobby is fishing and exploring the waterways in my area, usually paddling around in my kayak. Waterways in general have always interested me, even as a young child. I'd be riding in the back seat of my parents' minivan and I'd see a creek or a river, and I just wanted to stop and see where it goes or really where it's coming from. Something about the natural flow of water is fascinating to me. It's like nature's highway. Flow of water is constant. It's always finding the most efficient route from a high place to a low place. It's both peaceful and powerful. Sometimes it's even dangerous, and it's really an integral part of our cultural memory. I think it's the contradiction of the flow of water that fascinates me. I mean, humans have always needed water to survive, to drink and to grow food, obviously. But, we can't live in water like fish. We have to live around it. We have to respect it. And there's always a fear of drowning or being swept away in strong currents. Of course, humans have tried to control water. I mean, that's what we do. It's human nature to try and control our environment. We try to impede rivers with dams or divert floodwaters with levees, but we can never truly stop the flow of water. We can only hope to slow it down. And when push comes to shove, even our best technology can be overcome by that persistent flow. Water cuts its way through dirt and stone over spans of time that even predates humans and will continue long after we're gone from this earth. It's oblivious to the restrictions of time, and that's something that we as humans, with our relatively brief time on this earth, it's hard to comprehend. I'm probably getting a little too far beyond myself here, but I think it's worth pointing out that even NASA scientists, guys that are on the cutting edge of technology and science, they're searching for new life and new worlds unimaginable distances away from our planet. And at the bottom line, what they're searching for is water. So, as you can see, I'm pretty passionate about all this. I could go on, but let me get back on track and back to my story as a child riding in the backseat of my parents' minivan and daydreaming about those rivers and streams we were passing along the way. The bottom line, I guess, is that I've always just been curious about where that water comes from. Let's take the Mississippi River, for instance. If you follow the flow of the river north on a map, eventually you'll find that it kind of just tapers away into not much more than a stream and a swamp somewhere up north. I think Wisconsin or Minnesota. I could be wrong on the location. It doesn't really matter because the point is, even one of the greatest rivers in the world, one of the most powerful forces in nature, it starts out as a little gurgling spring in the ground somewhere. And I find that truly amazing. So, anyway, that's the seed that was planted in me early on. But let's fast forward again through the years, and as I gradually started to, pursue this interest in exploring waterways, that interest was fostered through things like canoe trips with the Boy Scouts or at summer camps. And then when I was in college and I was a little more independent, a lot of times I'd spend the weekends just camping and fishing at the local lake rather than, going out to parties like a lot of my peers were doing. And then finally, after college, as a young adult, I had a steady job. I was able to purchase my very own kayak. It was a 6-foot Old Town. I got it on Craigslist for like $200, and I still have the thing. Actually, I love it. But I started going out my own and looking for more adventures. And specifically at this point, I was exploring waterways around the Ross Barnett Reservoir area, which is near Jackson, Mississippi, and that's where I was living at the time. And actually, I still do currently. But fast forward again to just a few years back when I purchased my first cell phone that could record video. I was always a fan of those wilderness survivor shows, like Survivor Man or Man vs. Wild. And so I decided to take a few minutes of footage of me fishing for my kayak, and I had the idea that I'd post it to YouTube or something like that. So I captured the footage, and using some cheap editing software I found on sale at Best Buy, I created just this little video. And I shared it with my friends, and I was really proud of it, but I don't really remember now what it was about or what the title was, but I think it's lost in some old computer that doesn't even work anymore. Maybe I can dig it up at some point. But anyway, the whole gist of this video was to encourage people to stop staring at their computer and go outside and have an adventure. I felt like people were wasting their time, especially on beautiful days, checking their news feeds and their email, or the kids were playing video games instead of going outside to play. But I let my girlfriend at the time, she watched this video, and she was very supportive, but she pointed out a contradiction. She pointed out that I was using all this video and sound technology and GPS mapping and whatnot to make this video, but at the same time I was discouraging people from using technology. I was telling them to get away from their computers and go outside. And she suggested that, maybe you could focus more on how people can use technology to enhance their outdoor experience. And that's when the light bulb went off for me, and the seed of the Ditch Fisher project was planted. And just as a quick aside, about a year later, that same girlfriend, I put a ring on her finger. And somehow, some way, she said yes, and we've been married for over 2 years now. And she's still the smartest person I know. And she's also the inspiration for the Ditch Fisher project. All right, so enough of that. That's my story, and I'm not going to bore you with it again. So let's kind of get back on track to the original question that I started out with. Are you a ditch fisher? Okay, so what is a ditch fisher? Well, once upon a time, while I was discussing with another paddler friend of mine the ins and outs of kayak fishing on the Ross Barnett Reservoir, he described jokingly the reservoir as really just being a glorified ditch. And, even though he was joking, he was also right. The lake itself, though it has some deep points in the river channel, it really just averages maybe a couple of feet overall, and anglers and large motorboats can't access most of it. But I can in my kayak. And his description of the reservoir stuck with me when I used my kayak to navigate across acres of lake that sometimes were only a few inches deep, but I was able to access these deep creek channels and stump fields and hidden pools and places that other motorized boats just couldn't get to. And that's what a ditch fisher is. A ditch fisher can get to places that other anglers can't. A ditch fisher seeks out hidden and hard-to-find fishing holes, exploring the wild places and seeking out new adventures, just for the sake of adventure. So, are you a ditch fisher? Would you like to be? I'd like to hear your stories about exploring outside. It doesn't have to be in a kayak or on a lake or even about fishing, really. Just share your adventures outside. All right, so that's a little context for you guys about where I'm coming from with this Ditch Fisher project. And we're going to take a little break. And when we come back, we'll get started kind of the proper way I'd like to format this podcast. We'll talk about a little news, talk about some upcoming events and features on the ditchfisher.com website, and we'll talk about the gadget of the week. So stay tuned. Okay, we're back. A little picking on Led Zeppelin there for your listening enjoyment. So, before we get to some news, I'd like to talk a little bit about how I'd like this podcast to work. Like I said before the break, I want to hear your stories about your outdoor adventures, but unfortunately, for now at least, I don't have any way for you to listen to the podcast live or even to take phone calls. The reality is at this point, until I can get some more episodes under my belt and I can link to some sort of feed like Stitcher Radio or Podbean, most likely the only person listening to this right now is well, me. So anyway, until that happens, the best way for you to communicate with me is to go to ditchfisher.com and to leave a comment on one of the posts there. Or there's also a link from the website where you can email me, or if you just want to email me directly, you can do so at the following address. And this is going to be a little weird to start out because, you'd expect the address to be at ditchfisher.com or something like that. But unfortunately, in Gmail, my preferred email provider, the name Ditchfisher is already taken. So for now, you can just email me at Eskimo, that's ESKIMO, .the, at gmail.com. That's eskimo.the@gmail.com. So send me your stories, your questions, comments to that address, and I'll happily read them on the air in subsequent podcasts. All right, now for some news.
I read the news today, oh boy.
All right, no news is good news, right? Well, in the world of politics, I don't think truer words have ever been spoken. And this podcast and website, I really want to avoid any kind of political arguments. I mean, it's the bane of any website when people start throwing around Republican versus Democrats versus ideology of one effect or another. But we really do need to kind of hit on the sequestration, or whatever you want to call it, basically the forced budget cuts that are going on right now between Obama and the Congress. And one reason I want to talk about that is because among the funds that are going to be cut are in departments like fisheries and wildlife folks, things that maintain our natural resources. And it's going to be interesting to follow going forward to see just how that affects, people like me and you who enjoy being outdoors. I mean, we really rely on the federal government to, maintain and our pristine natural resources and parks and things like that. And they are a resource that I think we sometimes take for granted. Now, it's neither here nor there whether these budget cuts will be a good thing. Possibly they'll come back and do it in a way that's even better than it was before. I don't know. I'm not really optimistic when it comes to the workings of our government. But it's something we're definitely going to follow in this podcast, and we'll give you some updates as we move forward. The other item in the news that I found interesting and sad at the same time is in Florida, they've called off the search for the person. It's a man whose bedroom was basically engulfed by a sinkhole that opened up just outside of Tampa, Florida. It's a 100-foot sinkhole. At least that's the initial estimate. And it basically, a hole in the ground just opened up right under this guy's house. I mean, can you imagine that? They've called off the search, and so I have not heard too much information. It seems like they called it off a little quicker than they usually would, but maybe they know something that I don't. And anyway, our thoughts are definitely with him and his family, and I hope for the best outcome possible. But Florida really has a problem with these sinkholes. They have a limestone subterranean, underneath the ground, and it's water soluble, and it basically, maybe somebody with more knowledge about the science of all this could send me an email correcting me if I get something wrong. But as I understand it, the water and the limestone basically get to a point where it just suddenly dissolves the ground right underneath and opens up these huge sinkholes. If you fly into Orlando, for instance, you can see what is basically looks like crater lakes, just these perfectly round lakes and ponds that just dot the landscape there. And that's what it is. It's sinkholes. And gosh, can you imagine? That's just really scary to think that you're just asleep in your bed one night and then all of a sudden the earth opens up and swallows you inside of it. So that just goes to, the power of water that we talked about earlier in the podcast. But anyway, it's a sad story, but it's also an interesting story, and we're going to be following that in the in subsequent podcasts. So that's it for the news for now, and let's move on to the gadget of the week. All right, so the gadget of the week is a nifty little device called the Looxcie camera. Now, it's spelled a little differently than you might imagine. It's spelled Looxcie. That's the Look-See camera. And basically what this thing is, you know those annoying Bluetooth devices people wear in their ears and they go around and it seems like they're talking to themselves? Well, this is the same concept, but it's a camera that you fit in your ear in the same fashion, and it gives you a first-person perspective of, pretty much everything that you see going on around you. You can link it up to your smartphone. You can send, instantly 30-second video clips to things like places like YouTube, or you can take longer footage and do it with your editing software to, make movies and that kind of thing. It seems like the perfect thing for a ditch fisher, out and exploring and being able to share your online experiences. I mean, basically almost instantly. But I've heard a lot of mixed reviews about this little device. Some people say the video quality is not that great. Now, there are certain options that you can get that claim to be 1080, video quality, and that is waterproof, that kind of thing. It sounds perfect, though the price for some of the upper ends is around the $300 to $400 range, and some of the lower ends are closer to $200. But again, there have been mixed reviews about the video quality, and the sound, and the way it actually links up to your phone apparently can be kind of buggy. So I'd really like to hear from anyone who has had some experience with this little device. It sounds like something I would be interested in possibly purchasing, but like I said, mixed reviews, and it's hard to tell from, product reviews what is coming from, people who are promoting this device versus people who are actually using the device. So if you've got any information on the Look-See camera, that's LOOXCIE, you can do a Google search to get some more information. I'd really appreciate it. So shoot me an email if you've had some experience or know someone who has with this little camera. And that's the gadget of the week. All right, guys. Well, thanks for listening to the inaugural podcast of the Ditch Fisher Project. You can look forward to some things upcoming here in the spring, namely the very first episode of the Ditch Fisher video cast, where we'll be taking a little adventure on Spring Branch Creek, which is a feeder creek into Pelahatchie Bay, and it's just a cool little place and a perfect example of the kind of place that a ditch fisher might go and explore. So anyway, for updates and other news regarding the Ditch Fisher Project, you can visit us at ditchfisher.com. Right now it's still a work in progress, but we're doing our very best. You can send me an email at eskimo.the@gmail.com, and hopefully we'll get to know each other as the weeks and months go by, and look forward to new podcasts. I'm going to try and do this once a week along the same lines of the format that we did today. And I really appreciate you guys' support and listening. Please send me your feedback, and we'll see you next week. Okay? So this is the Ditch Fisher signing out.